Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlie Kyle. I'm the principal of Innis College, and welcome to the annual Harold Innis Lecture. Begin with the land acknowledgement. And since I do not have it before me, and I don't risk saying it by memory, I will be reading it from the screen. We wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional home of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and celebrate on this land. So it's my great pleasure to invite you to enjoy, that's a rather convoluted way of putting it, I'm happy you're here, to this annual tradition. We've had quite a diverse array of speakers, but I will say if there's one person who's been essential to the success of this over the years, it's the person I'm about to introduce, and that is Sita Ramkalawansing. And Sita is, I have no introductory notes for Sita, first of all, because if I were to actually give the full extent of her accomplishments, we'd still be here at midnight and the actual talk wouldn't have begun. But suffice to say that I've met a fair number of people from this city in my time in this role, and I don't think I've met anyone as connected as Sita. So if you say, oh, what about person X? Oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, I can call that person tomorrow. Yeah, I was just emailing that person yesterday. Like, Sita knows everyone in the city, and I think more important than her knowledge base is the fact that Sita will connect you with all the people she knows. She's a person of her word. And we're so eternally grateful that she has agreed to be the chair of the Harold Innis Foundation, because she has helped us secure a really interesting array of speakers over the years. So this is just my way of expressing my appreciation to Sita, as I do whenever I see her, because she's a person who is valuable to know and lovely to spend time with. So she's going to say a little bit about the foundation and the talk, and Sita Ramkalawansing.
Thank you, Charlie, and welcome to the 2024 Harold Innis Lecture. You already know my name. It's Sita Ramkalawansing, and I have the privilege of chairing the Harold Innis Foundation Board, and we are co-sponsoring tonight's lecture with Innis College. Several members of the Foundation Board are here, and I'm grateful for their continuing service. I'm also particularly grateful for the support provided by the Innis College team, in particular Shayla Anderson, whom I don't see in the room, Megan McDonald, whom I don't see in the room either, but I can tell you they've been here earlier, and Ben Weststraight. And of course, Innis's incomparable principal, Charlie Kyle, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to work with Charlie. I think I've never met a principal at the university, and I've had a long connection with the university, who seems to know every single student at the college and everything about them. And I think that that's really a remarkable kind of gift for the students of the college. The foundation was established in 1969, 55 years ago, and it has supported a scholarship program and continued on an ongoing basis, and discussions such as these lectures about the ideas of Harold Innis, after whom the college is named. I don't think there's another college on campus that's actually named after a university professor, but Harold Innis was. Recent lectures, as Charlie has said, has come from a variety of backgrounds, reflecting the scope of Harold Innis's work. Our recent lecturers have been Robin DeLittle from the Globe and Mail, literary star Dion Brand, historian Charlotte Gray, Inuit activist Ayu Peter, journalist Andrew Coyne, poet and professor George Eliot Clark, and former mayor David Miller. I'm also delighted to tell you that next year, joining this group of illustrious speakers will be Minal Matani, and she's the head of Canadian Studies at UBC, and she'll be giving next year's lecture. Not only is Minal an acclaimed academic, Her most recent book is an amazing memoir, and this is what it looks like. And the title is May It Have a Happy Ending. And it's a memoir, as she says, of finding my voice when my mother has lost hers. We are, of course, though, delighted, Manila side, we'll hear more about her next year, that tonight's lecture will be given by Helga Stephenson, and the discussion will be moderated by Deepa Mehta. It is only fitting that this discussion on film is occurring as we approach the 50th anniversary of cinema studies here at Innis College. Principal Kyle will introduce our guest and moderator. He will also give closing remarks after our cinema studies student, Delia Lapala, who's sitting right here in the front, extends appreciation to our guest. Thank you, Delia, for doing that. And without further ado, here's Charlie to introduce our guest speaker.
I need them all.
That's mine.
But I need what's in it.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you have two.
Yeah. Sita's just trying to inadvertently embarrass me by taking away all my notes. But I foiled her. Anyway, it's shocking to me, given I have a long history with cinema studies in this city, that I had never ever actually met Helga Stephenson until quite recently. And it turns out we both had, the odd point of connection was Massey College. And once I met Helga the first time, I thought, oh, now I get it. I now understand why, in a sense, every institution she touches turns to gold. Because she is this sort of force of nature and energy that transforms things into going concerns. So it was a kind of no-brainer when we were talking at the foundation about who's this year's speakers should be, because we did want to tie it into the, as Sita had said, the 50th anniversary of the Cinema Studies Institute. But Helga's influence reaches far and wide, and I will just read what is a quite, I think, modest and succinct bio that she has provided me with. And I think part of the reason it may be, you might think, oh no, he just took his glasses off again, so he's not even going to start reading. Part of it is, I think, that part of that biography will be explained and broadened through the course of this talk. So consider this a kind of aperitif to the main course that is coming. So, Helga Stephenson is a Canadian film industry executive and member of the Order of Ontario. Born and raised in Montreal, I'm saying it because it has an accent on it, Quebec, and educated at McGill University, she started her career as a publicist at the National Arts Centre. In addition to her work with the Festival of Festivals, now called TIFF, the Academy of Canadian Cinema of Television, sorry, that should say and television. I'm reading verbatim and there's a mistake there. I should really blame the paper, not myself. And the Human Rights Watch International Film Festival. Helga has also worked with the Havana Film Festival, the Reykjavik International Film Festival, and is one of the founders of the Cinefest Sudbury International Film Festival. And I will just say parenthetically, after having talked to Helga about this rather concise bio, I said, is there nothing else I can add? And she said, well, you could say that I was given an award by Cuba, and then I was later given an award by Iceland, and I thought, okay, well, the pattern is wherever you go, they want to give you an award. So I said, does that mean Innis College is going to have to figure out what award to give you after this talk? And she didn't disagree that that would be the logical outcome. So at any rate, without further ado, let me introduce tonight's speaker, Helga Stephenson.
Thank you, Charlie, for those kind words. Thank you, Sita, for inviting me. It's a little daunting after being retired for a while to come back and start singing the song I have sung for so many years. And so tonight I'm going to talk first about film festivals in general, about what it was like in the early days of TIFF, how I became director of the Toronto International Film Festival, and then how after I left the festival, I became involved with small festivals in different parts of the world, and why I think film festivals are extremely important and maybe even more so today. I remember being at a cocktail party one time when I was working at the festival, and a woman said to me, you know, I love the film festival. I just love those movies, but I said, I don't really understand exactly what they are, why they exist beyond bringing me great films. And I said, yeah, that's what they do. And I moved on. However, it did get me thinking about what is this beast called a film festival. I came to the conclusion that festivals are good for everyone and we should have lots of them. Just like that cartoon from the New Yorker, which I think somebody was going to put up. I hope they put it up. You know, it's the one with a little town at the top of a tall, tall hill. There you go. This is a classic film festival cartoon. It made me laugh, but then I recognized that it had more than a grain of truth in it. Festivals are huge boons, just cornucopias of bounty to the community in which they live, to the work they show, to the artists that they promote, and to the industry they serve, and to the public they attract. Businesses like hotels, restaurants, cabs adore film festivals because they register huge increases in their revenues. Artists love film festivals because they are key to getting noticed, something every artist wants. The industry loves them because they do the heavy lifting in anointing the best and identifying up-and-coming talent and trends. And the public loves them because they get a curated version of the best of world cinema, both local and international. Win, 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 win. But the work needed to create this alchemy of business, government, industry, public, and artist relations falls to the film festival director, supported by board and staff. To secure the money, the right programmers and venues, make sure it's all in place, the film festival directors then become a sales job. Selling to the sponsors and the government, which triggers a crushing mountain of paperwork. Proposal after proposal, meeting after meeting, followed by reporting, followed by more meetings, but you gotta have money, so you do it. Selling to the distributor, the sales agent, the director, the producer, convincing them why putting their film in Toronto is a good idea. No, a great idea. They love the Toronto public, but is this a good decision for the film? And what about Venice, New York, and Telluride? And who are in direct competition for these films? Will they hold a world premiere for Toronto? Do they need the visibility in those other markets more than they need to be seen in Toronto? What are the important next steps for that film in order to get the maximum window and to prep its route to the Oscars? There are lots of questions that have to be answered before that decision is made. And then selling to the public. The ticket revenue is obviously needed, but more importantly, their presence is needed. Toronto is famous for their warmth and enthusiasm and enthusiastic audiences. Now, can you believe that? I mean, someone once told me that the festival was the only time in Toronto when Toronto audiences did not behave like Toronto audiences, because they went wild at the end of the films and they chatted very happily in the lineups as they hunted for hints as to what to see next, what to discover. And in fact, many friendships, romances, and marriages have come out of those lineups. But I digress. The filmmakers really love our audiences. It is their dream come true, a full theater going crazy after seeing their film. Filmmaker nirvana. So this audience was key to attracting films because they attracted the filmmakers, which attracted the buyers at a time when Toronto itself was not exactly a draw. In the 70s, Toronto was not a hot spot on anybody's map. So it's not easy to wrestle all these elements, but in the end, when it all comes together, it's extremely rewarding. And you have liftoff. Maybe the greatest rewards are in a public that come away more enlightened about what film can do, and the fact that you have played an important role in the development of an artist, be it a screenwriter, an actor, or a director. Being selected for the festival becomes a great accelerator in the arc of a career, Becoming a hit at a festival just speeds up that acceleration process. We don't make the films, but we can bring a lot of attention to the work, which is key to moving ahead. So we do share in their success from the sidelines. We have always had the early films of the great directors of today, Almodovar, now showing at TIFF, by the way, Cronenberg, Deepa Mehta, the Coen brothers, Denis Villeneuve, many, many more. And they came with their early films looking to break out, and we helped them to do just that. And that feels good. So how did a convent girl from Montreal end up becoming the first woman director of a major film festival, the Festival of Festivals, as it was then called? I knew immediately upon arriving in Toronto in 1976 and going to the first film festival that this was the world for me. It promised me a connection to the entire world through the common language of film. I had grown up in Duplessis, Quebec, and the ironclad partnership between church and state that ran everything much like a banana republic. But then when I was thinking about it, a lot of provinces in Canada were run like separate banana republics with strong men running them. This partnership in Quebec between church and state meant that we were all basically repressed. So after a fire in the cinema killed a lot of people, movies were off the table. Not until you were 16. No child could go to the movies. Therefore, movies became magical things, the kind that, we could glimpse only occasionally in town halls when they played the adventure movies, the kind that Steven Spielberg refers to about watching as a kid. One was forever running through swamps in Florida or swinging from treetops in Tarzan movies, or watching all the Gidget movies in basements during birthday parties. Eventually, the government broke down and opened the cinemas for children to watch the 10 Commandments, of course, in Technicolor. This was mind-blowing for a young person who had only ever seen crappy little 16-millimeter black and white prints in bad places. I was scarred for life by the 10 Commandments. The slave scenes killed me with nightmares for years after. I still cannot watch it. Needless to say, the movies had a big impact on me, and I doubt that I'll be seeing Ridley Scott's new Gladiator 2. I don't think I could take it. I wandered through a second-rate convent-educated system in Quebec that they offered women at the time, home economics and folk dancing. No biology, just science, and carrots were orange because God made them that way. Thankfully, I belong to the generation of baby boomers who changed all the mores as they passed through them. And so when I emerged from the convent system and ready to bust out, I had a lot of company. The world changed dramatically, and me with it. At McGill, I attended an erotic film festival produced by none other than Robert Lantos with his trusty sidekick, Victor Lowy. I did not know them at the time, but they, of course, went on to change the course of Canadian production and distribution. For us boomers, if it flickered on the screen, it was magic, and the movies were changing with us. In Europe and in Hollywood, they were beginning to reflect our life. So after working for Expo 70 in Japan, and then wandering around the world as a hippie, I came back to a Quebec that was focused upon itself. So I moved to Ottawa in the glorious Trudeau years, working in communications at the National Arts Centre and the Canada Council for the Arts. Now this was very key because it proved to be my on-the-job training for arts administration, audience development, and selling culture to Canadians coast to coast. I dated a film critic, and so began my film education, which was greatly aided by the appearance of the newly strengthened Canadian Film Institute and their sensational programming. This institute boasted of people like Linda Beath, the first art film distributor in Canada and the first programming director of the Festival of Festivals, Wayne Clarkson, fresh from his MA in London, Piers Handling, newly graduated from Queen's, and a student of Peter Harcourt, a brilliant professor, probably the most knowledgeable person in the world on Canadian film, and who had a profound effect on Canadian criticism and the Canadian film world in general, and whose students populated the Toronto Film Festival. I arrived at the festival in 1979 as director of communications and began to seriously dig into this international world of art cinema. I was working with Bob Ramsey and Maureen O'Donnell at SRO when the festival's new director, Wayne Clarkson, hired us after a very protracted campaign on our part, and off to Cannes we went. We invented the Festival of Festivals cocktail party and then sailed into the festival in Toronto. It was called the Festival of Festivals because it was designed to be a people's festival, unlike other big festivals which concentrated on industry and catered to the cultural elite. There was to be something for everyone, which was a very smart idea because at the time, everyone in Toronto went to the movies, and there were movie houses everywhere and lots of them. It had been the brainchild of Bill Marshall and Dusty Cole, who had seen Cannes and thought, we want one of those. We want it here in Toronto. We used to have laughs that we should fill Bloor Street with sand and pretend it was the south of France. There were Canadian film producers fresh off the success of Outrageous, and they wanted a big platform for the budding Canadian film industry. So promoting film, giving it an international platform, was always at the heart of the Toronto Festival. They eschewed the competition model, deciding that this would be everybody's festival, which was revolutionary at the time. But again, a very smart move, given the nature of the Toronto public, the highest movie-going audience per capita in North America. And the natural place of the platform marketing in America by the studios, which meant that when you opened what would have been called a difficult film, you opened it in 3 markets, and that would be Los Angeles, New York, and Toronto. And then a few weeks later, after word of mouth had done its job, they would open it up wide in a lot more theaters. Canada at that time represented 10% of the North American market, and Toronto was the biggest chunk of that 10%. Bill had the foresight to pick off talent from the International Women's Festival of 1973, which was very important because it proved you could have a big film festival in Toronto and lots of people would come. He picked off Linda Beath, as I mentioned. He brought in Anne McKenzie, who had been the production manager and had developed Keeping Creditors at Bay into an art. And so between them, they kept the doors open. Kay Armitage, your own Innis College Kay Armitage, joined them later as a programmer, another veteran of that Women's Film Festival. Bill, there was a film, by the way, at TIFF just last week, in the last few weeks, about, there's a lot of 50th anniversaries going on. I think TIFF is having a 50th anniversary next year. So, it was playing, and so if you catch it, try and catch it somewhere. And then Bill then raided the Canadian Film Institute when he wooed Wayne Clarkson to become director, and Wayne hired Piers. It's all part of a family and a network, isn't it? To become the Canadian program and program book editor. It was a baby festival, but populated by very bright, plucky, and dedicated people who believed there was a great future for this event, and who just took the bit in their teeth and ran with it with the help from a lot of people. It was into this world I arrived as director of communications. I had to have other clients because they couldn't pay me enough to live. But we made it work, and I had an office at the festival, and I became part of the management team. We had no marketing budget, of course, and in a classic case of unintended consequences, the Ontario Censor Board stepped in. They made it possible for us to be on the front page of every newspaper and headline every news broadcast with their insane insistence on cutting 17 seconds from this film, 12 seconds from that film, as if that were going to change anything. But they were chopping works of art, devastating to the filmmakers and a total international embarrassment. But it did create visibility for us here and made a lively environment at the office as there were bets placed every year on which film would attract their attention. I spent my first working festival getting punched out at the door of the front door of the Elgin Theatre, when not everyone could get into the screening of old Praise of Older Women. Thanks to a 17-second cut by the Ontario censor, this thing had hit the front pages, and people who would ordinarily never come showed up. And that's when we invented the phrase, we were not oversold, we were overattended. There was a sense of humor in the press in those days, and you could have a lot of fun. We had unsung heroes, Sid Olin, president of Labatt's, who brought them in kicking and screaming because we were not their ideal market. They liked people who drank 10 beers a week. We didn't. They liked rock concerts. So they called us trendsetters in an effort to justify the investment ordered by the president. Bernie Austrie, who forced the Ontario Lottery Corporation to fund us on an annual basis. They had to scramble at the end of every year to find the money to get to us. And George Anthony, the entertainment editor at the Toronto Sun, the only paper in town that supported us, who basically was a fan. They even printed our schedule, for God's sakes. And he opened the doors in Hollywood, and of course, you had the legendary Jack Daniels, who basically made the TIFF Lightbox happen. Even I was a sort of an unsung hero. It was my credit cards that financed the annual trip to Cannes. Cash flow was low in April, so I carried the cost until August when tickets were selling. And I mention this because it was typical of the spirit around the festival that made its success possible. A lot of people doing their part, no one had to carry the entire weight, and this involvement from many sides is key. Everyone felt invested, everyone cared, and they deserve a lot of credit as they helped to get the festival to where it is today. We had a rambunctious board, not a lot of suits, that signed personal notes of $5,000 each to create a line of credit at the bank. Once, when the bailiff's locks were on the door, our chair, Martin Connell, paid the bill, forced us to learn about cash flows and budgeting, and we had to pay back the loan. He actually taught us a lot. And we had great programmers who opened the world for us, highly respected, well-liked, and very good at their jobs. Toronto did something very different here, too. Each programmer had total autonomy over their selection, which went against the grain of normal festival film programming. It was done, which is usually done by committee, and still is in most festivals. And the notes in the books were signed by the festivals, so the success or the failure of the film, they had to wear it. And so the programming became eclectic, personal, bold, and distinctive. The great Toronto story is the story of Diva, a film that had opened in France and more or less died, and so the producer, Serge Silverman, tossed it onto a shelf to be forgotten. David Overby saw it, loved it, and asked for it to come to Toronto. Silverman said no. He was cutting his losses. The fight was on, and finally the film came, and history was made. It was a huge success that triggered a heated battle among the specialty distributors who had just arrived on the scene. It was sold, became a big, huge hit, and went back to France, became a hit. After it had died, it comes here, it's a hit, and then goes back. Sounds like Canada. Anyway, the international industry picked up their ears big time. During this time, the festival produced the first Cronenberg retrospective, the largest Canadian retrospective ever produced, which jammed the theaters from morning till night, the largest Latin American retrospective, and much more. We also did a lot of innovative things to make the experience of filmmakers coming to Toronto better. We created the Hospitality Suite, sometimes known as the Hostility Suite. It was a place where filmmakers could meet, talk, and have some food and drink. Toronto was not so interesting in those days and shut down early, so we kept the suite open during the day, closed it in the evening, and reopened it later at night. It went way on into the wee hours and allowed the filmmakers to get to know each other. Creative partnerships happened and new films were born. But there was still lots more work to do. We had to build a solid relationship with Hollywood, a job which Wayne and I took on. Frankly, they were not that interested, but were watchful of the Canadian distribution laws. So once the government support came for the festival, they felt they should do something supportive. We worked through the marketing and publicity channels rather than the booking channels because they got it. They all knew the magic of the Toronto audiences, and they understood what the festival could do for them and their films in a cheap and efficient way. We had the audiences and we had the press, all in one place. A case in point is The Big Chill. They had no idea what they had on their hands. Was it a hit? Was it a dud? What was it? They all stood at the back of the theater and listened to every reaction, every cough, every sniffle, every laugh, and at the end, they knew they had a hit. They went home, upped the marketing budget, and history was made again. It was a huge hit, and this happened time and time and time again. Wayne moved off to the Ontario Film Development Corporation, and the job of director came up, so I applied. The board was mystified, completely mystified. What was this publicity girl doing, jumping out of her box and applying for this job? They had no idea of the role I had played in developing relationships with the studios and internationally. And to be fair, they just didn't know much about anything that I had done. They gave the job to a guy from Vancouver who wanted to turn the festival into a middle-of-the-road art house event. This vision did not sit well with the staff, so a difficult 9 months ensued, with him decamping back to Vancouver. It was not a happy time at the festival. After acting as interim director and a thorough headhunt, I was offered the job. But even then, during the interviews, they would argue about the fact that I was a woman. And would this hurt the festival? Could the festival survive having a woman as the director? I sat quietly and I accepted the job the minute they offered it. And then we were off to the races because I had made a pact with Piers Handley that should this come to pass, he would join me as artistic director and I would take care of the rest. What we had at that time was a very disheartened and somewhat broken festival team. Piers honed his programming team by adding some new programmers and putting into place a policy of wooing directors. We knew we had them once they were here bathing in the adoration of the Toronto audience. We knew if we got them here and they went through that experience, they would remain loyal and bring in their next films. And because we had the buyers here, and if the film got sold, we were golden. I went to work on rebuilding the festival, all the while working to accomplish a vision Piers and I had discussed during the programming of the Latin American retrospective, Winds of Change. We knew we wanted a name change from Festival of Festivals to the Toronto International Film Festival. We wanted a year-round film program to develop audiences, to support the film studies programs that were blossoming across the halls of academe, to train staff for the festival, because it was becoming increasingly difficult to produce a world-class festival with part-time help. We wanted to create a center for film, to build the festival into such an integral part of the community that it could not be threatened, to ultimately have an archive to accompany the library we would build. We had big dreams, and the ultimate dream, of course, of establishing the Toronto Festival as one of the three big festivals, Cannes, Berlin, and Venice. We wanted a cinematheque for the study of film throughout the decades. We soon had the best team a festival could hope for, a stellar programming team, a valiant director of finance, a relentless director of fundraising, a superb and crafty director of communications, and a deft director of operations who could make it all happen. We also started the sales office, which served the buyers and sellers that came to the festival, always a very active part of any festival. We did not want a market, but we needed a division or something that would suit the needs of the filmmakers and their reps, and to service the Canadian film industry by bringing the buyers to them. This was enormously successful and now will become a full-fledged market in a few years' time. Now, getting on to getting the Cinematheque dream come true, took a little up and down road. We tried to take over the Canadian Film Institute in Ottawa, but the Quebec-leaning board chose Serge Lozic, from Montreal, citing that film culture did better in French societies. I received a heartfelt apology years later from one of that board, lamenting they had made the wrong decision. And they did make the wrong decision. However, it was too much of a leap for them. We were new, and I can't really blame them. But it was true. In the French, le cinéma is on a par with opera, theater, ballet, classical music. And in the English world, it was entertainment, therefore business, not culture. I remember a dismal meeting with the Deputy Minister of Culture of Ontario who asked why I was there. Why was I there? Films belonged in the theaters and were entertainment, therefore business, not culture. Not the happiest of meetings, but he soon moved on and better deputies arrived. Remember, there was also a Canadian film industry trying to get going. But this ministry did not recognize that as culture either. I was getting very tired of hearing this refrain, I can tell you. Sometime later, Gerald Pratley's Ontario Film Institute hit the rocks. He had labored long in an almost hostile environment and accomplished many great things, but in spite of all his work, the time had come to either kill this institute or find a new home. I went to see David Silcox, the more enlightened deputy minister, because the institute had come under his wing in its last days, and he was stunned that our board would even consider this. So under our very able, pragmatic, and smart chair, Alan Gregg, we hired Heather Reisman, now of Indigo, then of Paradigm Management Consulting, to lead the board through an exercise to either take this move to institutionalize or remain a kind of guerrilla operation. We had hit a fork in the road. We presented, it took a full day of a lot of arguing in the boardroom, but at the end of the day, the decision was to institutionalize. We presented our decision to Silcox, and then the deal had to go to cabinet for sign-off and to have some funding attached. And that in itself was a rocky road, as this item hit the cabinet table too early, and it was thrown out. So we, my friend Cindy Grauer and I, she was a Liberal operative, had to get it back on the cabinet agenda and get some money from a group of politicians who could not care two hoots about this thing. It was a real cliffhanger, but we did it. And finally, Cinematheque Ontario was born, with our first screenings being in the backstage theater next to Manulife. We then moved to Jackman Hall at the AGO and finally to TIFF. Our greatest move was hiring James Quant, who was working at Harbourfront, who came and turned the Cinematheque Ontario into one of the best in the world. Even today, it's booming. By the way, if you're a member, the Cinematheque screenings are free, and they are fabulous. And the theater's full of young people. The films are great, so I really encourage you to sign up and become a member of TIFF. And then during my tenure, I had some very proud things. One was the creation of the Cinefest, the Sudbury Film Festival, and the film circuit that was born out of that initiative. At some point, I noticed that in Quebec, they had a film in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. And I went, wow, that's very interesting. I think we should have one here too. So we started to look around, and I went, it's never a good idea that I didn't poach, by the way. And so I went to Wayne Clarkson and said, how about we do a little investigation about a film festival up north? And he said, great, because it was very politic for him as the Ontario Film Development Corporation to be seen to be doing things outside of Toronto. So he gave us a little grant of $25,000. We hired Jeff Pevere, who toured lots of towns in Ontario, and frankly, I thought we were going to end up in Thunder Bay. It had a big population, it had a university, it was diverse, and I thought, well, I think it's going to be there, but I had to wait for the information to come back. And then out of Sudbury, a promoter had caught wind of what we were trying to do and mounted a campaign to get this thing to Sudbury. Knowing that you can never impose something from the outside, we were also on the lookout for the person who could light the fire in that community and get the work done. Cam Haynes was that person. We brokered his relationship with the Canadian distributors, sometimes nice people, not always. And, just say Sudbury did not light up their world, so we made a business case for them, and they caved, and they finally helped. Sudbury was an instant success and remains so to this day. And then one day, Cam calls and he says, North Bay wants a film, and so does Elliott Lake. And then the light bulb went off, and I go back to my old classical days when I knew that companies like Columbia Artist Management in New York with classical musicians had developed a small town market for all of these artists. And so I knew that many things were possible in these towns. But we had a person I called Elsie Glutz. Elsie was the person who lived there and who could get the town excited, could get the theater rented, could get the tickets sold, could get the whole thing organized. And once we identified him, we were in business. We delivered the film, the publicity material, and hopefully a filmmaker that would make the whole event very special. The film circuit was born, and today the film circuit sends over 150 films to over 115 communities across Canada, a number they expect to surpass in the next year or so. Everything was moving along nicely, and then I had a baby, and I wanted to be with her. I was tired, and it was time to hand the festival over to peers. It was time to build a big organization, and it was time for me to take care of my child and continue my work in other ways, so I bid adieu to the festival. And this is where I got into the world of small film festivals, because not everything has to be huge. So during my time at home, I became involved in the smaller festivals, which kept my itchy hand in several pots. The Human Rights Watch Film Festival, the Havana Film Festival, and the Reykjavik Film Festival. They are wonderful events where small festivals are great events where you can see great films and where you can actually spend time with filmmakers that would never have any time in the bigger festivals. So they have the essentials: good films, good people. What more do you want? I had made friends with Wendy Keyes, the administrator and program of the New York Film Festival, and she had become involved with Human Rights Watch in New York, and she produced their first Human Rights Watch Film Festival in 1988. When the Bushes came in, Human Rights Watch wanted to expand their base, so of course they looked to the nearest closest place, Canada. Wendy called her friends Brenda Dinnick and me, and we sat down in Brenda's kitchen and began the process of bringing Human Rights Watch to Canada. And they all wanted a film festival, so 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, so I said, okay, we'll have a film festival. We made an agreement with TIFF, and we began in the Jackman Hall of the Art Gallery in 2003. We programmed with help from the festival programmers, because of course they knew where all the films were all around the world. So, and in a few years ago, we moved the festival to hot dogs, and it was very successful at TIFF, but it was always a struggle to push the tickets. And you can't see 3 of these films a day. I mean, you would kill yourself. So you have to pace yourself through these festivals. And what we did when we moved to hot dogs is we made the tickets free. And then this huge wave of younger people came. And that was hugely rewarding. And it was, again, they're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. And after, about 15, 17 years or so, that seems to be my lifespan. I left the festival, I stepped down, and Jennifer Bechwell and Nick DePonsier now program it. As for Havana, I had always maintained my contacts after CUSO sent me there in 1974. My contacts were musicians and filmmakers. Needless to say, I had a great time in Havana. So when I worked at TIFF, we always tried to bring Cuban filmmakers to Toronto. And one of them was an old friend, Tomas Gutierrez Alea, probably their most famous filmmaker, who made the Oscar-nominated Strawberries and Chocolate, a film about gay life in Havana. In Toronto, the gay staff had started the Gay Flambé, a party for the gay filmmakers. And as we had no money at the time, it was at my house. And one year, which usually involved police arriving sometime 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, he called and he said, could he come to the festival and could he go to that party? And I said, well, I'll ask, but you're a filmmaker at least. And you're not gay, but I wasn't allowed to go, by the way. So anyway, he got here and he went and he sat in a corner and he sort of watched the whole thing. And then he went home and he made strawberries and chocolate. So these are the things that make, bring a lot of meaning to the job. And then I became close friends with Yvonne Giroux, the director of the Havana Film Festival, who stayed with me during TIFF. And because I had lived in Havana and understood the intricacies of Cuban life, which are very intricate, by the way, we talked about Cuba, Havana, and the festival at length. So I entered into a kind of advisory role, and together we brought many daring films to that festival, to the delight of Cuban audiences, the consternation of the bureaucracy, and as always, I brought a slew of Canadian films and filmmakers with me. Around the same time, I get an email out of the blue asking me if I'd come to Reykjavik for a conference. It was suggested by Joni Sigvatsson that they call me because I knew how to build film festivals. He's a longtime friend and producer of David Lynch, and that is why you always see merry sweater-clad Icelanders with ice tinkling in their cocktails appearing in the background in things like Twin Peaks. That's the Yoni factor. Well, of course I would go. I'm Icelandic and always had a longing to go there to meet my family. I have the family tree dating back to 1000, and I was curious to meet them. I met the director, and she wanted to start a film festival. So I said, sure, I'll help you. But that was great because they'd had a festival, but it had floundered, so this new one needed to happen. However, in small places, tensions run deep, and there was some disagreement, and so the distributors decided they wouldn't support her. So we had to pivot, and we made it a film festival of discovery. And for the second time, I hired Dimitri Epidis, who was the Eastern European programmer for TIFF, the co-founder of the Festival de Nouveau Cinéma in Montreal, and the director of the Thessaloniki Festival in Greece. He had a brilliant eye and endless passion for finding the new great filmmakers, and I had hired him for Toronto, so I said I need 10% for the next one. So he did his usual amazing job of programming, and it seemed like the filmmakers were keen to come to Iceland. It has a very cool reputation, as you know, and it's where I spent a lot of time with people like Yorgos Lanthimos, Jim Jarmusch, Sarah Driver, James Gray, Aki Kaurismäki. This is what I'm telling you, small festivals are great for actually meeting people. And certainly there was not a business case to be made for Iceland with its $300,000 population, 300,000 person population, not a number to make any distributor or sales agent blood run hot. So the perceived coolness of Iceland was definitely a factor in attracting talent. That coupled with the fact that tiny Iceland punches way above its weight in terms of filmmaking. With minuscule budgets, they regularly produce films that go to major festivals like Cannes, to the Oscars, and are a perennial favorite on the film festival circuit. I spent another sort of 15, 17 years there, and I got to know my Icelandic family. These festivals were key in keeping me somewhat current in the film festival world. They kept me attached to the world out there. I met endlessly fascinating artists, and I learned a whole lot about just about everything, frankly, because if you watch these movies, you do learn. TIFF now has a more diverse leadership, which is a great thing for these days and for our diverse Toronto. The festival is one of the ways that Toronto identifies itself now. It's an economic driver and an artistic triumph, which brings a gigantic spotlight to the city every year. We get to enjoy the film festival type films all year long, thanks to the TIFF Lightbox and Cinematheque. And Toronto, as other cities like Cannes, Venice, and Berlin, even Sudbury, has done well by its film festival, and the festival has done well by Toronto. So I encourage you to go to the many film festivals in this city, to see those great films, and to mix with like-minded people who share your enthusiasm, your kind of people, my kind of people. Thank you. I go over here? Yeah.
I said that sotto voce, and then she said over here. Yeah. So, so as they're walking, I will introduce our moderator, whom I'm inclined to say needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Deepa Mehta is an Oscar-nominated filmmaker whose award-winning films have played at major film festivals, there's your link, and been sold and distributed across the globe. Her first feature film, Sam and Me, played at the Cannes Film Festival, receiving an honorable mention in the Camera d'Or competition. Her works include the Elemental trilogy, Fire, Earth, and the Best Foreign Language Oscar nominee Water, Midnight's Children, the adaptation of the Salman Rushdie book, Bollywood Hollywood, Heaven on Earth, and Biba Boys. More recently, Deepa has directed Funny Boy, which won Best Director at the Canadian Screen Awards, and the 2021 Leo Award Best Picture. Deepa's also worked in television, and her credits include the pilot and second episode of the Netflix original series Lila, plus 2 episodes including the pilot of Little America on Apple TV, and a little series you may have heard of called Yellow Jackets. Deepa's latest film, called I Am Surat, is a documentary that premiered at TIFF in 2023 and in competition at the BFI London Film Festival the same year. It's been screened at festivals around the globe and is now streaming on the CBC. She's currently working on a feature film based on the book and script Forgiveness by Mark Sakamoto, as well as the feature film Troy Lakaya, set to film in India. And we couldn't be happier than to have Deepa, who's a longtime friend of the college and has been here many times in Helga's seat, which is to say the interlocutor who answers the questions, and so it seems fitting that she now take the mic to ask some questions. And I'll just tell you, for the purposes of your participation as an audience, it will start with a discussion between Deepa and Helga, and then at a certain point, Deepa will say, we'll now take questions from the audience. That's your cue, but just remember this crucial thing, that you should not ask a question until you have a mic in your hand. For one thing, this will be shown later on YouTube, but then also for those people in the audience who may not be able to hear you without your voice being amplified, it's a courtesy to them. So please just wait. A runner will come with a mic. Just be patient, and then you get to ask your question. And Deepa gets to choose whose questions get asked. So you hold the power. Okay, so I'll let Deepa and Helga take it away.
Are these, oh, they're on.
They are. Okay.
Helga, this is amazing. I have to tell everybody, the first time I saw Helga was on the red carpet, and she was dancing with Patricia Rosemer. I think it was the White Room, was it? I think so. And I think not the Mermaid, but the second one. And I thought, my God, look at that, a director of the film festival, and she's a woman. And the director of the film is also a woman. It was such a, I just arrived in Canada, and I didn't know what to do as a colored person. But you gave me hope that I could make films, and maybe one day one of my films would be at the festival. And you were there cheering me on. It was lovely. So thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. No, it was just amazing. You have been, always, always. So I want to tell you, why do you like films?
Films take me away. Films take me into life. Films, I don't know. I've always loved them. It's my preferred art. I like it better than anything. If I could watch movies all day, every day, I would.
Wow, really? Have you seen any of mine?
I've seen all of yours.
Okay, so I mean, I feel that we're here and we're with you, and this is a very crucial time in the world right now. I feel what's happening. We all know what's happening, and it's not too good. So, what is the future of film festivals, Helga?
I think the film festivals are more important than ever because what I see is a kind of dumbing down of a lot of filmmaking. And when I look at the streamers, it's hard to find a good film. I love action films, so the streamers are actually pretty good for action films. But when it comes to something else, I'm having a very hard time finding my kind of film. And so I'm very dependent on the light box. I'm very dependent on Criterion and Mubi. And and because, places like the Varsity are getting starved for product, occasionally they're running art films, but they're harder and harder to find.
I mean, do you think, I feel sometimes that the streamers are taking over.
They're totally taking over. They
They
absolutely are taking over, but they have taken over. It's interesting, I watched the Academy-nominated films with my friend who is an AMPAS member. So that's our November and December, we watch movies. And it's very interesting because the movies that are made for movie theaters are shot one way. The movies that are made for Netflix and for television and for Prime Video are made a different way. And the obvious is immediate. In the first few scenes, you go, without knowing, you know that it's a Netflix film.
Yeah.
So we also hunt for the biggest screens in town. Young Dundas has big screens, by the way. And we hunt for big screens, and we hunt for the sort of the best event quality that we can get.
Do you think cinema as we know it on the large screen, what you brought to Toronto and you brought to Canada, is going to survive?
Hello? Okay. I think it will survive, but I don't think it will survive in the same quantity as now. The film festivals are the home of these films, which makes the film festivals more important than ever. Maybe it becomes more like art gallery. Maybe it becomes more selective, and it just won't be as common and as readily available as we're used to.
And I remember one of the things that you said was that festivals is about like a marriage between the business, the filmmakers, the distributors, and the press. I mean, the whole idea of the way we depended on our time earlier on press to get to the cover of, I remember Brian, McLean's and even, I remember, was it, yes, it was, you were right, it was the smaller newspapers, The Sun, that always had the cover. What's going to happen to that?
Now Magazine.
Yeah, and Now Magazine, that's right.
And Now Magazine, and then the major papers came on board eventually.
There's nothing there now. I mean, you have
No.
to. So how are we going to get the word of mouth out now? What
It's
do
all
we
social
do?
media. It's all social
I
media.
know, but
You have to decide that this is something that you like, and you have to become a little bit of a sleuth. I mean, I regularly, when the fall festivals hit, I scan the Venice program, I scan the New York program, I scan the Telluride program, just to see what's coming up. I like new directors, new directions at MoMA. I don't go to them, but I scan them to see like what's happening, and then you have to go on to the blogs. You have to go on to find somebody who's writing that you like and follow them. But it's work.
Suggestions?
It's work now.
I have no idea.
I don't write this second, but I have a list which I
You will
could.
send it to
Yeah,
me? Yeah. Okay, cool.
there are people that. I was sad that Anthony Lane left the New Yorker,
Yeah.
but
I didn't know he had.
well, Justin Chang's there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard, I'll get it a little personal, because I heard, when I realized that I was going to be talking with you, I said, I'm going to talk to Piers Handling and ask him to reveal some things about you.
Oh, yeah,
And
great.
Piers is in, I think, Milan right now.
Milano.
And I wrote to him, and he said, I have to read out what he said, because it's really cute. He said, actually. Let me think about this one. Without knowing what she's going to say, it's hard to give advice. A couple of things come to mind, he said. Her early time at the National Arts Center, which you said, was important for her. It taught her how to think on her feet and use limited resources to get what was needed. And then he said, she was curious and adventurous when young. Living in Laos, I think, she was running a bar. Is that true?
Air America.
Oh my God, okay. Were you a part of Air America?
Not practically.
And a year in Cuba where she learned Spanish. And she was extremely quick on her feet, could think through things very fast, and was very adept at working out how to turn a situation to mutual advantage. That's pretty cool, right? She assembled a team of the festival with great skill, got the best and let them get on with the job. Me included, he says, so that's, that's sweet. She had strong strategic skills, always got the big picture in the right way, and made the right decisions.
Ooh,
That's
High
huge coming from
praise.
Piers, right? Yeah. What do you think?
that's high praise.
He says, then she says that, exactly what you said about the film circuit and the cinematheque.
Yeah.
And in fact, outside even what you said, he made it very clear that how instrumental you have been and you continue to be in our film scene. It's huge, Helga. I really, really personally want to thank you and want to thank you from all the filmmakers that I know who were thrilled. Yeah. Questions? Yeah.
Yes, so my question is about this year's STIP festival when I went, and there was a protest going on, maybe you saw that in the media, against showing one of the films in front of the TIFF building. And the film I'm talking about was called Russians at War, and there was Ukrainians protesting in front of the building. I was there and I saw it. So then basically the TIFF decided to suspend this film. And if I'll give you opposite example as European Film Festival starting this week, and they are supposed to be showing European films only from the countries that belong to European Union. They are also showing Ukrainian film, and Ukraine, as we all know, does not belong to European Union. There's a paradox. So
What's the question?
the question is, apparently the program that's films that are programmed are not being shown when people want to see them. They are being cancelled.
Well, TIFF did show it after the film festival. They showed it on the 17th.
Talking about a film festival.
The film festival showed it at TIFF on the 17th of September. Russians at War. And they had to cancel it because, historically, film festivals are very used to protests. We used to say if there's no protest, we haven't done a good job. This is not a real film festival. But the difference is from then to today in social media and personal threats and personal violence being threatened through social media is just too dangerous now. And so people have to protect staff. it's a reality of today. I mean, it's why a lot of politicians are stepping down, why mayors don't want to be mayors of little towns anymore, because they just get a rain of garbage over the internet, and it's not worth it. So TIFF has never canceled a film because of a protest that I've ever known of. And what they did was they did show it 2 days later in a setting that they had more control over. There were a lot of police there. They checked the bags and all that kind of stuff, but it was a safer environment for everybody, and so they showed it. The interesting thing about that film is that it had played Venice, no problem. There are a lot of festivals that it played, no problem. When it came here, there was a problem. I can't explain that, but
I think talking about the times, really. Yeah.
yeah, but the times are that the threats are no longer. You know, we had some hilarious times at the festival. There was the Catholics were in an outrage because we were doing the Godard Hail Mary, and we had programmed it at the university, and they jammed all our lines, and they had instruction in all the churches across the street to phone our lines and jam them, and they were on their knees with a ghetto blaster saying the rosary and all that kind of stuff. But sadly, the festival had a last-minute program change, and the people coming out of Paul Schrader's Mishima were confronted with sobbing Catholics on their knees saying the rosary in front of the theater, and these two very disparate groups looked at each other and couldn't figure out what the hell was going on.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a social media strategist for film, so I completely understand the power of social media to promote, film. But what do you think about the state of what is film criticism, right? Because it seems that, as during the promotion, all the outlets seem to be fading away. And it's harder to figure out, like, to find a journalist or to find the media outlet that's going to give the credibility to the film and not just the numbers.
Well,
So,
I know
I
this
don't
is
know.
going to sound crazy, but Rotten Tomatoes lists all the critics and who they write for. And when you start reading through those critics, you get, first of all, you get a list. And second of, you start to identify the people whose opinion you respect in terms of how they explain themselves, how they write, all that. It's actually a great resource.
I think so too. I mean, it's from the
And they
Spectator
list
to the
them.
New Yorker.
There's a
yeah.
whole huge, sometimes there's 200 of them,
Yeah.
but there's a list, and they tell you who they are. And you can pick the people, as we always do. We pick the critics we like, and we follow them.
Yes.
First, Helga, thank you for everything you have done for this community and the films you've brought to us. Just to back up what you said earlier, that you could tell within the first few minutes a film that's being made for the streamers, like the Netflix, and as opposed to another art film. What are those differences?
The way they shoot them. Television is usually much closer, a lot of faces and less scenery and less expanse, as it were. That's your first clue. Oh, and the editing, right.
It really is from the first two shots, isn't it? You can make out immediately.
Yeah, Suzanne says it's end user driven, and I would, they're in the, and also I don't know,
So there's a large
when you get the
screen.
big expanse
Yeah.
films on a TV screen,
Gets lost, doesn't
it
it?
gets lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you have to get big TVs.
I was wondering if you can comment on the current state of the Toronto International Film Festival. I know that the ticket has become more expensive and has become more exclusive, which is moving away from the spirit of People's Festival, which
I
also
agree, yep.
affect People's Choice Award and who gets to vote on them. And I was wondering if you can comment on that and what's your opinion?
I agree with you. I lament about the rise in prices for the film festival. But when I look around, and I see who pays what, how much for what, maybe $20 isn't $1 million, you know? I mean, maybe when I see what they're paying for Taylor Swift, when I see what they're paying for opera, ballet, theater, all that kind of stuff, what you pay for a book, TIFF is still cheap. However, money is tight for everybody, and the greatest thing would be if they could find a sponsor to keep the ticket prices down. Of course, that would be a dream, because they absolutely and desperately need the revenue.
Think of Taylor Swift the next time you go. Yes.
Hi, thank you both so much for this. I'm learning quite a bit. Oh, it's quite loud. I'm a filmmaker, so I am interested in learning a bit from the both of you about, you know, the bigger festival, TIFF, and also the smaller festivals, and just if you could maybe both speak to the importance of both the larger and the smaller film festivals in the rising career of an emerging filmmaker.
Start? You continue? I'm
It's your
telling
show,
you,
go for
I'm
it.
telling you, if you go to a small film festival, let's say, and you get a prize, you're an award-winning director, and that's your title from then on. Right, I mean,
Yeah.
you parlay things into gold for yourself.
I remember when you invited me to Reykjavik, which was like a few years ago, and I said, Helga, I'm not going to Reykjavik. I mean, who goes to Reykjavik? And she said, shut up, you're going to get an award from the mayor. So I went. And I did get an award. So it was, you know, she's right, you know. So there. I have the keys to Reykjavik. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's important. It really is, and it's nice to get in, and you get to meet other filmmakers, which is also excellent. And what Helga said earlier is so true about TIFF, which is that the programmers are in charge of choosing what they want. It's not by committee, and they have their names there, and then you can give them shit later, right? So it's good. It's very good. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things you would have noticed in my speech is the importance of network. There was a network that created a network that created a network that came around and did more, but it was a network. And everything in the film business is network. So it increases your network. You can't be a filmmaker all by yourself.
Best of luck. Yes, there, at the back. There.
Thank you for both of your contributions to Canadian cinema. Just a question about Hot Docs Theatre. Helga, I'm just wondering if you have any insight as to what's up with Hot Docs. I mean, it's my favorite theatre. I love documentary films.
Oh, you know.
I'm so sad that it's
I
shut
mean.
down. What insight might you be able to provide us with on that? And what, if anything, have we learned about the closure of Hot Docs?
Well, what have I learned about the closure of Hot Docs? I would say, I mean, it's very hard. I don't know a lot of fact. Pat Mullen, who writes for POV, has been very good on reporting on what happened and how it happened and all that kind of stuff. The only thing I would say is, you know, address your problems early, not late, because when they're late, they're too big. And what's going to happen to the theater? I think that the first concern will be to save the festival, because the festival is the driver. As the festival is the driver for the light box, the festival is the driver for the hot dog cinema. And I think the desire is to, save it all. But it'll come down to money. They need some unsung heroes. They need some people with money who care and would be happy to help them. They really need, those people who stepped in the early days and helped us. They need those people. And but the problem is maybe it's a very tight environment these days. Everybody is very needy. The arts organizations are all bleeding. It's hard. I'm not sure, but that's what they need. And I'm fairly positive and that they will pull it together and that there will be a festival. They just announced a new programming team, so that's a great sign. And, the question is whether they'll be able to keep the theater or not. And I hope they do, because they are a very big part of the community in Toronto. And they were, deep in the hearts of many, many people who enjoyed their programs all year round.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and of course the festival, which was so important for the filmmakers.
Anybody else? Last question, last two? Okay. The three. Why don't you go at the back, right?
I have a question for both of you, from both perspectives, from the maker's perspective and from the
festival.
The festival, and or the one who kind of harvests the maker's work, in a way, because there is a kind of meaning in certain things. So both of these kind of things, I see a certain conviction sometimes that makes you put all of that effort, go through all of these crises sometimes, or struggles. So for making a film, for example, from Deepa's side, what would be the inner, deeper motivation? Is it just the story itself? Is it you wanting to put something out to the audience and see? And then once you have that, then from Helga's side, why put all of that effort? Why exhaust your life into something of that sort? Why put all of your work in it? What motivates you, I mean? What pushes you to work? Because it's not easy. I've done both a bit. I've tried a little film festival and it was exhausting. It's excruciating. It dries you out. It's almost killing if you really want to make it work. So what makes you want to take all of that energy and put it in that?
For me was, I really wanted to share these incredible films that I saw. I wanted the whole world to see them and to feel the same way I did about them. I wanted to help that artist get to the next stage in their life. And coming to a film festival helps them, because it helps them with the marketing of the film. Everybody makes a film to be seen. So the more you can make it seen, the better it is. And you want that filmmaker to succeed. So, but basically you want to share the riches. That's what drove me. I wanted the whole world to see these wonderful, wonderful, wonderful films that the programmers had discovered from all over the world. I wanted them to learn from them, because they came from all over the world, and they were made by people from their own countries, telling their own stories. You learned a lot about how the world works, how we're basically all the same, and where the problems are, and you just learn a lot about history, you learn a lot about present life, you learn a lot about hopes and dreams and aspirations. It's a very uniting force. I like that.
why do I make the films I do? I mean, what drives me mostly, and I would think actually completely, is a curiosity to know more about a subject I'm interested in. So, I mean, I'd heard that, for example, that when I was pretty new to Canada, maybe about 10 years or something, and I'd heard that, and I go back to India very often. I'd heard the last time I was there that there were no lesbians in India. So I thought that's an interesting. It was a big thing going on. So I started researching it. I was very curious about such an absurd statement. 1.5 billion people, and there are no lesbians in India. So it was curiosity that made me write a film called Fire, and David produced it, and it was really, and we made it. We didn't know, was it a Canadian film? We didn't get funding from any Canadian body, nothing, Telefilm, anything, nothing. Everybody said it wasn't a Canadian film. But TIFF was amazing. TIFF said it opened, David McIntosh was there, and Cameron Bailey, and David said, it has to open Perspective Canada, which was such a shock to everybody, that a film that everybody's saying is not Canadian and didn't deserve Canadian funding opened Perspective Canada. And it just, didn't it open up the world for us, David? I mean, it was just amazing. So this is what TIFF did and continues to do, which is so important to filmmakers. They didn't care that what's Canadian. I mean, I'm brown, everybody else was brown, and but I was a Canadian director, and that was enough. So thank you for that.
I believe, Helga, you said that the hope or ambition was that that TIFF would reach the level of Venice, Cannes, and Berlin. Was that achieved? And if so, what's the measure of it? And if it wasn't, why not?
I think it was achieved. It's a very hazy thing. What is the measure of it? It has the industry kind of pronounces that. That's where world premieres started to turn up. That's where more industry came, more talent agents started to swamp the festival hunting for talent. It was how seriously it was taken within the business side of the film world. And the artistic side followed, frankly. And now all the festivals, they used to be quite different from one another, and now they're kind of becoming, globalization has hit the film festivals. They're kind of the same. Cannes is still the queen.
Yes.
Thank you, really interesting. Helga, after so many years of promoting other people's movies, have you ever had the urge to make your own?
I did, but I never, oddly enough, I never had the confidence. I'm a great connector, but I never had the confidence in my creative choices to actually go into production. And be a Canadian producer is, I mean, eventually you start making money, but you do not. I mean, it is a, you know, I like to eat, I like to have a roof over my head, I like to have a car, and I just didn't see how I could make it work. People have, but believe me, they put in the work, and believe me, they risk, and they deserve everything they get in the end.
Thank you so much. That was the last question. Thank you, Helga.
Thank you, Deepa.
That we give the last word to a student from Innis. And we have Delia Lapla, who is a second-year cinema studies and English major and she's going to send us off with some thank yous to our guests. I'll just say one more thing, because I will let Delia literally have the last word. That we have an event coming up as part of our Canadian Film Forum on November 27th, I believe. Have I got the date right, Shayla? Yes, which is Rice Boy Sleeps. So even if you've seen the film before, I would, if you haven't, watch the trailer and you will want to come to see the film. The trailer alone will sell it for you. And we always have a guest, so it makes the evening even more enjoyable than just the film itself. But now we'll pass it over to Delia.
Hello everyone, I'm Delia Lapala, a student here at U of T and a member of Innis College. I would like to extend thanks on behalf of the college and the student body. First, I'd like to thank our moderator for the evening, Deepa Mehta. She's an influential Canadian filmmaker, and her work is important to many of us. We're lucky to have someone with her unique insights and experience here with us. And I'd also like to thank our speaker for this year's Harold Innis Lecture, Helga Stephenson, for sharing her time with us. One of the great benefits of attending a school like U of T are the opportunities to hear leaders in so many different fields. It's this kind of learning that can't be replicated through traditional classes, and to see role models doing work in the real world is an informative and inspirational experience. Ms. Stephenson worked to shape the way cinema is celebrated and viewed in Toronto. Her work at TIFF helped to create a festival which is an important part of film culture in Toronto and provides a place for a diverse range of films to be viewed. It also provides a touchstone for many to engage with Canadian film. As a student, I feel lucky to have the chance to engage with the work of Ms. Stephenson as I did tonight hearing her speak, and as I do in my everyday life as a student of cinema in Toronto. So one more time, I'd like to thank our moderator and our speaker, Helga Stephenson. Thank you.